Welcome, good afternoon, everyone, and a happy National Heritage Month. Welcome to the first activity of the Heritage Conservation Society for National Heritage Month 2020. National Heritage Month, of course, is a coming together of the efforts of the government cultural agencies, civil society organizations like HCS, academia, and other institutions to celebrate the richness and diversity of our cultural heritage. This year's theme is Mga Kwentong Pamana. And in that theme, we wanted to explore one of the stories about the fight for heritage conservation. And this story is that of the National Heritage Conservation Act, or Republic Act 10,066, which became law over 10 years ago on April 10, 2010. Okay. I'd also like to announce at this point that HCS is a proud founding member of the ASEAN Cultural Heritage Alliance. And on that, I'd like to invite you all to join us on May 23, 2020 for a discussion on heritage in the age of the pandemic with colleagues from across Southeast Asia. We'll be posting more information on this event over the next few days, so stay tuned. But first, let me introduce myself, our speakers, and the team supporting this event. I am Mark Richard Evidente, the current president of the Heritage Conservation Society. I am both a lawyer and an environmental planner by profession, and I run a firm, 2Echo Inc., that does policy and planning consulting for sustainable development. Joining us today are Ivan Anthony Nares, the immediate past president of HCS, who is currently pursuing PhD studies at Purdue University in the United States. He is currently in the faculty of UP's Asian Institute of Tourism, holds an MPA, a diploma in urban planning, and a business economics degree, all from UP, and is a 2012 10 Outstanding Young Men awardee. Welcome, Ivan.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
Okay. Next, we will have architect Joel Rico, an architect in the conservation field practice, recently working on the design of COVID facilities for the government. He was a past president of the Philippine Institute of Architects, a founding president of the Guild of Filipino Architects in Conservation, president of Archaeology plus Heritage Consultancy Firm, an author and consultant, and a faculty member of De La Salle College of St. Benilde School of Design and the Arts. Welcome, Joel.
Hi, good afternoon. Welcome.
Okay. Next, we have Kathleen Tantuico. She graduated from the Ateneo cum laude with a degree in cultural sciences, specializing in cultural heritage, minor in history, and then obtained a graduate diploma in archaeology from UP. She graduated from the UP College of Law in 2019 and just recently passed the bar examinations. Her Juris Doctor thesis was on international law perspectives on the repatriation of colonial cultural materials. Welcome, Kate.
Hi, thank you, Mark. Thank you.
Joining us also will be Lucille Carmelilong, or Kay, who is currently the Executive Director of the Nayang Filipino Foundation and Secretary of ICOMOS Philippines. She previously served as head of the NCCA Committee on Monuments and Sites and advocated for a strong registry system for heritage sites at the NCCA. She holds degrees in law and economics from UP. Welcome, Kay.
Hi, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone.
Also joining us is Solo Locsin. He is a current trustee of HTS and director of the Negros Occidental Historical Council and a faculty member of La Consolacion College in Bacolod. He advocated for the protection of heritage sites in Silay City, Negros Occidental, was a former counselor of Silay, and holds a master's degree in public management from Ateneo. Welcome, Solo.
Hello, Mark. Good afternoon. Thank you.
Okay. And last but not the least, we have Abigail Ko, who had been a volunteer with Kapitbahayan sa Calle Bautista since 2013 and has served as its president in 2017 to 2019. She's a licensed and registered Filipino architect and currently taking her graduate studies for Masters in Development Management at the Asian Institute of Management. Welcome,
Hello.
Abby.
Hello, good
Okay.
afternoon.
Good afternoon. So good afternoon to all our speakers. I'd also like to acknowledge my other colleagues from HTS who are working behind the scenes at this moment, namely Jack Garcia, Laia Boqueren, Gio Absede, Florabel Tupas, Keith Reburiano, and Eric Dural. Thank you, guys. Okay. I'd also like to say thank you to Orly Ballesteros and Jay Agonoy of Exlinkevents for providing us the tech support for this wonderful online event. And also, we are currently broadcasting live from the pages of HES, Xlink, and the Tourism Congress of the Philippines, all on Facebook. Okay. Now, before we proceed to the event proper, I'd like to provide a very quick background to the Heritage Act. As mentioned earlier, the Heritage Act, or RA 10066, became law over 10 years ago and was the first attempt to comprehensively protect Philippine cultural heritage. There's a lot that one can find in the law, and a lot more that one can say about its implementation. That's why we have all our colleagues here today to share their lessons and experiences about RA 10066. But let me sum up just a few four key points that we should all know. Okay. One, heritage is not just about old buildings. It can be pretty much anything that contributes to our cultural identity, from our cuisine to our music and stories, our clothing, for example. And this distinction, these are the things that we find in the law. These are the distinctions we have in tangible and intangible heritage, movables, and built heritage. But for purposes of our discussion, we are focusing on built heritage. This is the heritage of places and structures. Okay. Second, enforcing the law for built heritage takes place across several government agencies, primarily the National Commission on Culture and the Arts, or the NCCA, the National Historical Commission of the Philippines, and the National Museum in the technical support role. The other cultural agencies may also be involved depending on the kind of heritage: the National Library, the National Archives, the Cultural Center, and the Commission on the Philippine Language. Okay. Third point, the heritage law is what set the 50-year standard. This means that places and things over 50 years old should be presumed to be heritage. There is also a standard that structures and things designed or made by national artists, manlilikat ng bayan, or national heroes should also be presumed heritage. When we talk about them being presumed heritage, it means that the cultural agencies are supposed to figure out whether these are worth being saved and how they should be saved. And the last point, on conserving built heritage, on conserving a site, it can take several forms. It can involve restoration, adaptive reuse, reconstruction, or even leaving things as they are, depending on what makes that site significant. So it's really all about the message of significance of a place and how that message is best communicated. But discovering the significance of a site, the strategy of conservation rather, all of that requires research. Now, that being said, I'd like to turn the floor over to our speakers to discuss the reflections on 10 years of the heritage law and what would it imply for their future. Of course, each of our speakers are allocated with 10 minutes, and they can use those 10 minutes to explore these 2 points in their respective discussions. So, with that, I'd like to turn over the floor to Ivan, or let's say the screen to Ivan. Okay. So, Ivan, let us know your thoughts on this question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark, and I'm happy to be here with everyone. As you know, the heritage law has been a very important landmark legislation for us in the conservation community. But of course, we still have a lot of how do I say this? We still have a long way to go to be able to come up with a law that can actually guarantee the protection of our built heritage. So we were actively involved in the technical working group that was drafting it in the Senate. But unfortunately, we were not involved in the technical working group that was drafting it in the House due to our commitments. No, but unfortunately, it was the House version that passed. No, so I think that one thing that we need to look at the in the heritage law is what we did for the Senate version. Second, I think that the heritage law tried to cover it tried to cover as much as heritage as it could. So the thing with this is that there were certain provisions of the law which we wanted to focus only on built heritage but became applicable to many other things such as artworks, no? So let's say, for example, the prohibition of how do I say this, of uh, bringing out no artworks of national artists, no. And the problem with that is even the living national artists would have an issue, no, with their own artworks. Also, we focus too much on artworks, but it did not include a provision for the early masters, which unfortunately, no, they are the ones who have a lot of architectural works, no, that are in danger, like Juan Arellano, Andres Luna de San Pedro, Tomas Mapua, Fernando Ocampo, no. So these were a lot of things that we after all the issues that we tried to address in that heritage law, it was still lacking. And of course, the Torre de Manila issue came up, and we realized that we need to put legislation for sightlines as well. I think that now that we've learned a lot from the implementation of the heritage law, there are certain things that we need to focus on now. The first would be the need for a new law focused solely on built heritage, because when you create a law that tries to capture every aspect of culture, you have too many chefs, no, ruining the soup, no? And we want to come up with a law that specifically focuses on built heritage so that its provisions, no, are specifically for built heritage. Second, there was one provision that we wanted to include in the heritage law. It was in the Senate version, but unfortunately, it was taken out of the House version. We want to formalize local government declarations. Now, while the local governments are empowered by the local government code to do their own local declarations, no, it has been only by encouragement, no, rather than a how do I say it, an outright provision in the law that local governments can declare their local heritage. At the same time, there is also different. There are differences in terminologies used by various local governments because there is no one single group or terminology given, no, in the law. The third would, of course, be we realize that implementation is very difficult, not because of the law itself, but rather because we lack the manpower in government for regulation, as well as the fact that people on the local level, they do not have enough capacity to be able to understand, you know, what heritage is about, and what can be done and what cannot be done to architecture, especially when it comes to adaptive reuse and other things. So one thing that we really need to do, as part of that built heritage law is we need to come up with a single regulatory agency. I think the one of the main reasons that the implementation has been really difficult for us is the fact that there are three separate agencies who may decide on the fate of heritage cases. No? And when we were making the heritage law, we were hoping that there would be a single registry that all agencies would contribute to. But unfortunately, when the law was passed, no, there is a single registry, but still every agency is able to contribute their own declarations to that. No? So I think that especially with the experiences that even the government agencies have undertaken, they've seen the need really for a single agency, no, to regulate built heritage here in the Philippines. So I've heard proposals, for example, of the National Museum being willing to transfer the regulation, no, of heritage to something like the National Historical Commission of the Philippines, no, and so that they can focus on their museum work. Or maybe we can come up with a built heritage commission. I think this is something that the three agencies and all the other members of the community should be discussing, especially since now that everyone has experienced the difficulties of implementing this law and understand, no, what is involved in creating or regulating or coming out with all these certifications. So I think now is the right time, and I think we should sit down together and discuss the possibility of coming up with a single regulatory agency for built heritage in particular. No. Second, I'm going back to local government. No, when we talk about local government, we also have to realize that these local governments also need training and capacity building. No, while we can tell them, no, you can declare heritage, sometimes there is a need to increase the local understanding of the concepts, no, of heritage conservation. So when we do this localization of declarations, it should be accompanied by capacity building. I think that is being undertaken right now, but it should be done really in earnest, no? So that they can come up with their own inventories. No, a third thing that we need to add is I come from a local government guild. Before I actually became active at the national level, I was with the local government of San Fernando, Pampanga as its tourism officer. And one of the things, especially after speaking to many of the heritage homeowners, one of the things that we legislated, no, were incentives. So in 2004, the city government of San Fernando, Pampanga was the first local government unit in the Philippines to grant real estate tax incentives to heritage house owners. No, this has also been done now. They've been done now in cities like Angeles, Silay City. Iloilo has a modified version of that. No, so there are several cities around the Philippines which have already enacted their own incentives. But I believe that incentives are very important because we've seen it work in San Fernando. I mean, it's a lot of the heritage homeowners were very surprised to receive these incentives, no, for real estate, and we simply responded because this is what you asked for. No, this is what you were talking about how much you spend on real estate taxes, and yet you don't get anything out of it. So this is something that we need to look into, no, both national and local levels. Finally, um, I think that this will be the most difficult part, no, when it comes to um, amending or enhancing. I would like to say enhancing the heritage law if we do come up with legislation that focuses on built heritage. I think we should find a way to insert a provision that speaks about the new paradigm of heritage. So right now, heritage value is not considered in the economic sense. No, I think that there should be a way to insert this new paradigm of heritage value into the new law, so that the heritage value of a place is considered, no, with regards, for example, to market value or other concerns. So when someone owns a heritage property, we are not only looking at, how much it used to cost, the land, the real estate, and the property prices, but now we add a premium, which is heritage value, into the equation. And I think this is something that, if we are able to implement, we can really change the way people see heritage in the way that other countries um, put a lot of value on their heritage structures. Just by being a heritage structure, a property becomes more expensive, no, or more valuable, and that is the new paradigm that we need to address if we are to really make all those changes in the heritage law 10 years after we've passed it. No, so again, I would just like to summarize. One, we need to come up with a single regulatory agency that would manage built heritage. Second, we need to push or include a provision for local declarations accompanied, no, by capacity building, so that the local governments themselves can respond, no, to heritage conservation issues. The third is to highlight the need for incentives. And there, aside from real estate incentives, there have been a plethora of incentives that has been implemented all over the world. I've seen and I've read so much while I've been here studying in the United States, and I do hope to bring back that knowledge to the Philippines. And of course, the fourth is the new paradigm of heritage, where we change the way we value a heritage property. It's no longer just looking at real property prices, but rather we include a premium for heritage value. So that is my take, no, 10 years after the heritage law, and I do hope that we are able to move forward, improve, and enhance, no, what we already have. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ivan. It's a very meaty discussion, a very, very, you have very clear proposals about what or how the Heritage Act can be improved, no? And of course, you bring with it, uh, the so many years of experience of from the time that the law was drafted up to the last, the 10 years of implementation that we've had, no? So from that, we'd like to shift now to a different perspective. And of course, to bring on board Joel Rico. And architect Joel has been, of course, working from a different perspective as an architect, who has worked on a number of heritage projects, a number of conservation projects. So he sees it really from the standpoint of a practitioner and brings so many years of experience to the table. So with that, Joel, yes, uh, the
Hi,
screen is
Attorney Mark.
yeah.
Magandang hapon sa inyo lahat. For the past 10 years, I think I was a member of NCCA when Heritage Law was passed. Medyo napamadali yan eh. So marami, tama yung sinabi kanina ni Ivan na Marami dyan, pinagsama-sama na lang muna, pero not necessarily naging maayos. Generally, now that we are using that and been naming that law into something that should protect our built heritage, nakita namin na medyo kulang siya. Medyo mahina, and at some point, only the RA 166 term ang medyo nakakatakot. But the provision inside, medyo hindi. Maybe yun yung kailangan natin, overarching provision na kailangan natin gawin to make our law, aside from being effective, dapat matatakot. Dapat tutulong. Dahil pag hindi ka tumulong, the strength of the law and the government will run after you. Several years back, and I think we were together, we went to Congress, kay Congressman Abaya, for the real property tax for heritage structures and its owner, and in the tax incentives. Unfortunately, during that time, anything about taxes, medyo mahirap palusutin sa Congress dahil that would be a deduction for the government. No? After I finished working with the Heritage Impact Assessment for the China Bridge, na-realize ko now using the website of the government, NCCA, ang daing natin kailangan pang gawin. Cultural mapping, absence of heritage master plan, kung kakayanin natin from the government agency, NHCP. I know pretty well na hirap ang NHCP. Konti ang tao nila, konti ang budget nila. I know na may hirap sa kanila to. No? And DPWH, especially DPWH. Kasi ang DPWH has the capacity to help and potentially madaanan nila yung mga built heritage structure natin. Just in the case of Sariaya and Lukban, na I became personally involved, na yung DPWH halted the expansion of the road that might hit directly the work of Andres Luna de San Pedro in Sariaya. And the heritage advocate in the group in Sariaya, tulong-tulong kami para mailiko yung buong kalsada. So sana mabigyan natin ng DPWH ng mapping, Google Map kung kakayanin natin. So para maiiwasan ng DPWH yun. Construction of new buildings that potentially will compromise existing old structure in its given town. Kailangan ma-identify natin yon, malaman natin. Number 6, medyo masakit to. Penal provision for unauthorized demolition of heritage structure for developers and contractors. I hate to say this, that sanay na silang sagasaan na lang mga lumang building natin. Baka sana kung may penal provision yung gagawin nating heritage law, baka kahit pa paano may matakot. Number 7 would be lack of adherence on buffer zone on all UNESCO World Heritage Site. I went recently before the COVID thing. We were Gabaldon in DepEd. We were in Ilocos Norte, Ilocos Sur. 3 of the World Heritage Site nakita ko personally, na naikot ko. And then makikita mo na may mga new building kino-construct inside the buffer zone. So, sana maging mas mahigpit naman tayo doon. Dahil talagang baka nakakasira sila. Okay, and then baka matanggal yung mga structures natin for the World Heritage Site. Okay, number 8, revision of the demolition permit form. A year ago, I personally wrote a letter to President Duterte with regards to revising the demolition permit, yung pinakapapel. Ang hinihingi lang ngayon sa demolition permit form, dalawa lang. Kung ikaw ba may-ari ng building at kung yung building mo, magigiba na. Yun lang. Walang pakialam ang form kung ang building mo gawa ng national artist. Wala silang pakialam doon. Sabi mo, magigiba na yan, public safety, gigibain mo. So sana magkaroon lang tayo ng parang concurrence ng cultural agency na bago ka bigyan ng demolition permit, dadaan muna sa cultural agency. Para yung cultural agency, i-validate yan. Hopefully, meron naman tayong stack of information about every old structure in any given locality. Para naman magagawa ng NCP yung kailangan nilang gawin, or NCCA for that matter. Number 9, this is the archaeology part of me. I've been working with UP ASP. That requiring all new construction is four-story or more floors with a foundation excavation of 2 meters down, na sana i-require sila to submit, to conduct an archaeological impact assessment. Sana, kasi in my in my period when we're working for different archaeological sites, ang dami namin nakita together with Dr. Victor Paz and then my entire group sa Archaeology Plus Heritage. Ang dami namin nakita ng mga mahalagang bagay na nakabaon. Pero the new building that will be put on that site is a 5-story, 10-story, 15-story building. Na sana, kung magagawa natin yun, ang dahil pa rin natin makikita. Although mahirap dahil konti lang naman ang archaeological community sa Philippines, pero it has to start somewhere. Baka naman kakaya natin. Especially yung mga malalaking development like gagawa ka ng mall, nasa Metro Manila, nasa NCR, or other historical district. Sana meron lang provision na gano'n, na i-require na. I was told na meron daw, kaya lang mahirap lang i-implement. Next would be revision of the National Building Code. Alam ko hindi part yun ng heritage law natin. But sana yung the National Building Code will be given, may chapter siya about maintaining and protecting heritage structure, irregardless of typology. Maswerte lang sa atin palagi simbahan, historical structure. It only comprises around 30 to 40% ng old structures sa buong Philippines. The 60 to 70% of old structures doesn't have a marker. So yun yung pinoprotect sana natin na masama naman sila sa protection natin. Sana magawa naman natin. I've been part of many conservation work. Makikita mo, only a handful sa ginagawa ko, wala talagang marker. So kawawa naman sila. Dahil kung wala silang marker, walang maitutulong yung gobyerno para sa kanila. Or kung may maitutulong, hindi kasing laki kung simbahan ng ang nagkakaroon ng damages. 11, sana we can inject through the CHED, Commission of Higher Education, the importance of heritage structure sa secondary and tertiary level sa atin. Dati, I propose sana NSTP ng mga college students na gamitin yung NSTP instead of sweeping street or whatever. Lagyan sila ng provision na yung mga nag-NSTP will, together with CHED and NCCA, mabibigyan sila ng project na in your locality, magpo-cultural mapping kayo. Yun ang gagawin nyo, being NSTP activity. If we can do that, in 1 to 5 years, tapos lahat yung cultural mapping natin, wala na tayong problema. Then, mas madali dahil meron tayong manpower na pumapasok year in and year out, or semester in, semester out. And then, number 12, there should be a law exclusively for built heritage structure and conservation. Kasi yung heritage law natin ngayon, hindi siya pwedeng kasama yung built heritage. Kasi malaki yung heritage law, malaki rin yung built heritage. So ngayon, kung maghahanap ka, I'm currently working a book on architectural conservation in the Philippines. Sana mailagay, not on the book itself, pero sana may batas na nangangalaga sa kanilang lahat. At yung mga method of construction, conservation, sana na andun din. Exclusively only for built heritage. Kasi in that way, hindi nagugulo ang built heritage sa intangible or World Heritage Site. Hindi na siya gugulo. So dapat mas malinaw. Lastly, I propose this kay Mayor Isko. yung Built Heritage Conservation Office. Sana sa Manila City Hall during the time, early on before the COVID, I think si Mayor Isko showed efforts on conserving what the remaining built heritage structure in Manila. So I think
Hello, Joel. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Joel. Of course, very very rich in terms of your experience and then your suggestions on how we can improve this regulatory system. No? So it seems that from Joel and Ivan's point of view, we really need a stronger system, a new system, in fact, especially for built heritage. No? Okay, so let's move to Kate, and Kate brings her own perspective as an archaeologist, but also as a lawyer who really she's blending her professional roles as both soon to be lawyer, no, soon to be lawyer. When you take both and sign the role, no, uh, and as an archaeologist, no, so that brings a different perspective to both professions, right? So, yes, Kate.
Hi, thank you, Mark. Thank you. For the perspectives of archaeologists, what sets archaeology and archaeologists apart from other cultural workers is that archaeological sites may not be seen or may not be visible at first glance. They may you need to dig archaeologically before penetrating an archaeological site and obtaining archaeological materials. So people can be standing on archaeological sites without even knowing it, but after an archaeological impact assessment or a survey, we can discover that that area is actually an archaeological site. So today I will be discussing a few issues and perspectives that archaeology sector would like to make known with applicable provisions of the heritage law. And these include immovable and movable cultural property. So, one concern of archaeologists is the destruction of archaeological sites even before archaeologists can do research in the site. So how are archaeological sites destroyed before that? First is by treasure hunting, and second, as said by my first two colleagues, is by um, um, large scale development projects like road widening and the building of high rise structures, even before archaeologists are able to conduct archaeological impact assessments on them. So, under the law, Article 3, I think that's Article 3, Section 5, we have a section on presumed cultural, um, important cultural properties. So we can see the law. It's being flashed on the screen. So under the heritage law, cultural properties are declared as national cultural treasures or important cultural properties um, through a process that starts with the submission of a petition to have a certain site declared. However, through this provision, it can be seen. Please scroll down a bit. It can be seen that archaeological and ethnographical materials are already presumed important cultural properties, even without any declaration. So that means archaeological materials being as they are, no need for any declaration. I think it's you can still scroll down to see the archaeological materials there. Um, yeah, letter C. So archaeological and traditional ethnographic materials even if they are not yet obtained, being archaeological materials, they should be under this law considered as important cultural properties, and therefore they already afford protection under this law. So, however, when it comes to enforcement, um, treasure hunting and the building of large scale projects such as road widening and other structures uh, in turn destroy the archaeological materials and the archaeological site even before they can be researched or they can be studied by archaeologists and other cultural workers. In fact, an internal rule in the National Museum is they allow treasure hunting for as long as the treasure hunters apply for permits. So for me, based on experience, I think this internal practice should be reviewed um, as soon as possible because I think it's conflicting for the further research of archaeological materials. In fact, if you look at Article 3, the whole Article 3, if we can show it, um, uh, even dealers in antique properties are also given licenses. So, with respect to antique properties, if you look at the definition of terms, they are properties that are around 50 to 100 years old and they are no longer in production. So, we see in this law that the the ability to maximize research on cultural materials is sort of diffused and given to authorized dealers of cultural properties. And for me, representing the archaeologists and the archaeology sector, this is a way by which archaeological materials um, can be distributed or circulated around the country without maximizing the research that can come with it. Okay. So that's one of the aspects in the law that for me can still be reviewed. And second, the second concern that archaeologists find interest in this law deal with movable cultural properties. So what sets archaeologists apart is they handle artifacts. So in an archaeological site, it is an immovable cultural property, and they handle movable cultural properties such as archaeological artifacts. So one way by which the law protects these movable artifacts is through the PRECOP, the registration system of cultural properties. However, as a colonial cultural property, as a as a colonial country, the Philippines has a lot of colonial cultural materials that were obtained even before the passage of this law during the colonial period. So these artifacts are scattered around the world in and are on display on various museums. And a close reading of the law shows that um, the law only protects registered these colonial cultural properties that are registered under the pre-COP system. So if we talk about colonial cultural properties that were removed from the Philippines even before this law took place, this law does not cover it. However, there is a provision on having international agreements with the countries that are in possession of these cultural materials. So, as a whole, as echoed by my two colleagues before, um, the this law there should be um, more laws that protect colonial cultural materials, and however, we have to remind the local government units that even absent a national law that protects cultural heritage, the local government units are already empowered to create local ordinances that mandate the protection of these artifacts. So the protection of cultural heritage really starts in the local level. So even if the heritage law does not cover a lot of aspects with respect to protecting heritage, it is really the local government units who are very much empowered to create ordinances that cater to the protection of immovable and movable cultural properties. So there, that's my take on it.
Thank you very much, Kate. I think that's a very good
Thank
point that
you.
times when we look at heritage, you're only looking at the vertical part, the built structure, but we often neglect that a lot of the meaning, a lot of the research that's needed is actually underneath the ground. We need to do the archaeological work to help establish why a particular place is important, and that a lot of our treasures are actually just as the previous speaker said, no, that we tend to forget, as Ivan pointed out, like colonial era, especially American period and all that. No, some of these sites are not properly recognized. So also a lot of our treasures from previous eras are not properly protected. No? Okay, so thank you very much, Kate. Now let's go to Kay Malilong. Kay has been an advocate for a long time, and then now works in government. Um, so, Kay, what points can you add to the discussion? I think it's been a very lively and full discussion so far. Yeah.
Yeah. I think my meditation on your question is, so should I see the glass as half empty or half full? And really, where have we gone after over 10 years? So as Ivan pointed out, the work of lobbying for this law started a long time ago. And one of the first things I did after I left my law firm life was to join Ms. Gemma Cruz, attend hearings in the Senate, and talk to local government officials about why there's a need to take care of our heritage. So it's Heritage Month, and I want to be upbeat and positive. So let's say, okay, the glass is half full. Um, there's a lot that can still be done. But in terms of how the heritage law has brought the conversation of heritage into the mainstream, I think that's one of its biggest achievements. And the fact that the Torre de Manila issue got national coverage, that's also a big thing. But is everything okay? Are we actually doing what we're supposed to do under the Constitution? We always go back to the why and the how. So the heritage law introduces this concept of significance. So we protect heritage because it's significant. Why is it significant? So you talk about historical significance, cultural, anthropological meaning. So it's about values and meaning. And then who gets to say that? So when national significance, so you have all these experts in the cultural agencies. Local significance, you have the local government units. And then how do those come into play? And once you know it's significant, where's that list found? Then what do you do with it, right? So the universe of determining what is heritage is still a work in progress. Somebody mentioned cultural mapping. Somebody mentioned the registry. So when we started, none of those things existed. They were in the law, but they weren't being implemented. So it was only around 2014 that the Philippine Registry of Cultural Property sort of started to take shape. I'm not like knocking any cultural agency, because if you look at the 1960s law, the Registry of Cultural Property was already there under a very old law that sought to protect, prevent the diggings of antiques from the 1960s. But the more holistic part, where you talk about what heritage is and what's significant, uh, that's a work in progress. So it remains the same. There's more participation in that people can nominate what's significant nationally. Then you go to the cultural agencies. A new development got added when the National Museum has a new charter and it passed on its regulatory powers to the NCCA. So we're still under that transition period now. So you also talked about the need for only one regulatory agency. And this is where, yeah, maybe, maybe you just need one system. You don't need to insist on a new agency, for example, and then make sure that that system really embraces all the things that heritage affects. So land use. How does heritage affect land use? Where should the permissions be obtained? Environmental impact assessment. So that's a very old law, 1970s. The implementing rules already include heritage there. How do these agencies work together? You just need implementing rules for that. So it might be a matter of, putting the right people, the right regulators who understand the why of the law and the how. Um, and then the other new trend is saying that culture is a pillar of development. So when the latest Philippine Development Plan was crafted, Chapter 7 includes a whole chapter on culture and the arts. So that's a big deal, right? Because it's the first time that that's ever happened. So yeah, half full. There are many conversations where heritage is already included compared to the way things were in 2007 or 2006 when we were still lobbying for this law. So yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. When I headed the Committee on Monuments and Sites at NCCA, we started working on a toolkit for cultural mapping, and that's been finished and that's out, and that's one of the flagship programs at NCCA. There's already staff that takes care of the Philippine Registry of Cultural Property. Uh, there's a list. I mean, it's still an Excel file. Like, ideally, it should be better than that. It's GIS. It's like part of the whole system of information that people from different regulatory agencies can access, right? So we don't need many lists, just one list that's binding on everyone. But then, as architect Joel pointed out, and also Ivan, there's a whole capacity building um, work that also needs to be done. And I think that work's an ongoing thing. Um, so yeah, there's 14 years um, from the time of lobbying and now so many achievements, and I'm very grateful to HCS uh, for leading that. But uh, the work, there's still a lot. That's all I can say. And yeah, like I said, I want to be hopeful.
Thank you very much, Kay. Yeah, I think even as we know that there's still a lot that the law can achieve, but also that in the last 10 years the law has achieved a lot. You know? Of course, as with any process or with any system, it takes time to build, it takes time to develop. But I think the mere fact, and as you pointed out, that heritage is now not anymore some fringe or minor issue. It's something that gets on the front page of the papers. It's something that a lot of people want to talk about. And there's this sudden blossoming of a lot of heritage organizations, both at the national and local levels. No, and I think that those are really good things, and the heritage law played a big part in making that happen, right? So, and I think in terms of that aspect, in terms of like growing that heritage movement, growing heritage interest, I think our next two speakers also have a lot to say in terms of how they were able to use the law at the local level. No, so our next two speakers are both local champions for heritage. No, so our first speaker at the local level is Solo Locsin. So Solo has been working in Silay, both in official and unofficial capacities to help protect the heritage of Silay City. So Solo, yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. I come from a city that has heritage conservation programs that date back to the 70s. And I think the heritage law um, is a step forward because those people who started our heritage conservation program way back are already retired or have long passed on. So it is a step forward. And I would like to point out that the heritage law empowers our local legislation. I think Ivan has pointed out that most of the heritage conservation projects are always community based. They're always initiated by the locals, and the heritage law has empowered local government units. So, for example, here in our town and in our province, we have been advocating heritage simply because it has been always part of our local identity and also contributes to our tourism industry. But when we passed our local heritage ordinance, during our committee hearings, sometimes the heritage law, to be honest, is overlooked because most of the inputs are very community based. Then to drumbeat support, I, for example, would just point out that did you know that there's a heritage law which we are celebrating its 10th year now. So really heritage initiatives comes from the community, from local government. And I've been reviewing the heritage law, and then I think it's in section 14, I think article 5, that are the pre-cap or the registration of cultural property. Our experience here in Silay is that well, we don't really get funding from the national government agencies. So it's actually the local government that finances the registration of cultural property. So we are actually in phase two of our cultural registration. The phase one is more on built heritage, and right now phase two, which is initiated by the for luckily by the DepEd, because they're the one who did all the cultural mapping, and we're ready to submit it soon. But everything like logistics, transportation, and even meals of those who volunteered for the pre-cup registration is financed by local government. And I remember Ivan coming here to Negros and going with our provincial tourism officer around Negros, of looking at the pre-cups of different localities, and that project again was financed by local governments. So there's the underlying is that it is local government that needs to be empowered by the heritage law and our future legislation, because it is always community initiated. I think our relative success in the heritage, the implementation of the heritage law is because we have community support, we have community understanding, and then earlier it was pointed out that there should be heritage value. Yes, actually, really right now, people saw the value of heritage in my locality. People started to practice adaptive reuse. We've been restoring buildings, and there are now cafes, small restaurants, bed and breakfast, hotels, events place. They're taking place simply because few years earlier, they saw the value, the economic value in preserving. Uh, I think it's very important that local governments should be supported. I think we lack drumbeat in heritage conservation. Um, I think we need more help from national government agencies, because if you ask during our committee hearings or public hearings, if you ask people who own heritage houses, they would always go back to their local government. When we place tax incentives, it's always going back to local government. And what is so interesting right now, because most local governments are after the SGLG award, or the Steel of Good Housekeeping Award of DILG, and part of that award, part of the requirements of that award is a registration of cultural property, local heritage legislation. So I think um, it is important that national government agencies keep local government excited with heritage, and we keep the public excited of heritage. It's something It's not something that it's old. It's something fun. Of like for the youth, it's what I call good content. So if you have good content in terms of heritage, um, the heritage law is very important. It is a step forward, um, and then it it promotes advocacies, local advocacies. Like for example, here in our province, we are always looking forward to activities and events, and I think the heritage zones provide those venues for our activities and events that will keep us busy and will keep to keep the localities alive. So, for example, built heritage has been providing a sanctuary for activities like for activities that promote intangible heritage like cuisine, crafts, traditions. So, empowering a conservation of built heritage is actually also contributing in the intangible part of heritage in preservation of tradition. So, my take is that we need more encouragement to the local government, more support for local government because they hold the key in heritage preservation. Just to add, as of my last input, is that in my in my town in Silay, I always credit that we have a one-stop shop in doing business, and we're doing so many activities in the local government. And in that one-stop shop, and one of the checklists is our local heritage ordinance. So you can't get a building demolished, you cannot put up a building without passing that one-stop shop. So that's how we preserve our local buildings, that they don't get demolished, because you don't get a permit from the office of the building official. You don't get a permit from the city engineers, from the local registry office, without passing our one-stop shop. Even these are the requirements before before they get before these papers and documents are being turned over to the mayor's office and get the mayor's permit and finally the business permit. So it's just getting people on board, and there's a it's a mechanism of preservation. So thank you for having.
Okay. Thank you very much, Solo. So there's that balance that needs to be struck between local government and national government and how they should be interacting in how we are able to protect heritage. Because of course the front line is that the local, and so how the national should find a way of supporting, providing technical financial assistance, right? And then but the local in turn really has to step up in embracing their responsibilities and recognizing the importance of heritage. Okay, and I think from Solo's point of view, as someone who's worked with the local government, um, we'll turn over to Abby, and Abby's now is working from the standpoint of civil society, working at the local level now. So, Abby, your turn. Okay, there you go. Okay.
Okay.
Hi, Abby.
I want to share my screen, but I find it difficult. Okay, so I'll just narrate it. Okay. So, thank you for inviting me to participate in this activity. I'm actually happy to share my reflection for 10 years because the year the Heritage Act was uh, passed, it was also the year I learned about HES. So HES folded me in this adventure. Well, the other speakers already mentioned what what to say. I think I'll focus more on our story to affirm the practices that I think worked and appreciated in our community, and also mention a few gaps that even though there are miscoordination in the government, as mentioned by the previous speaker, at the bottom level we also have that. So, but I'll just run through it. So I'll share my story as a private stakeholder. So I'm asked to share the challenges of implementing the Heritage Act. Since the year I learned about it, I was just a student. Um, I'll share my journey from student until now. So there are 4 points that I think is a challenge in the community in the lowest level. So it's message, capacity, differences, and alignment. So it was mentioned before that many people do not know what heritage is, what they have. So how do we deliver the message across, and how do we make the people understand? And then for the capacity, it was mentioned also by Mr. Ivan Henares. After you give the message across, how do you train the people what to do and how to do it? In the lowest level, our problem is not only that, but also how to organize the people to get together and talk about it. So that's really a challenge for us. And next is the differences. Attorney King pointed out that the different values and meanings of heritage, and we really experience that because people have different values and priority. What is something that is important to them, or what is their culture, and how do they define themselves according to social position, or according to their city, or according to um, their interests. And then the last one is the alignment. There are many people that I encounter that are participating with the personal vision that to contribute to the heritage development. But the problem arise when the people get together with the differences, and how they do it did not align. So in terms of level, like the barangay and the local government, the city hall is not aligned. The civil society and the technical expert do not align in how they practice things. And on the national law and the local level and the barangay, how does it align as well? And also for the scope, like, do we focus on the architectural, intangible, and also the approach or school of thoughts? So for the message, I'd like to share my foundation for learning about heritage. So it was in 2009, 10 years ago, that the Heritage Conservation Society came to our college and established a student chapter, and where I joined. That time, heritage conservation is a subject in our school. Uh, although the conservation of old houses has long been practiced in by architects, but it's just not emphasized on heritage conservation. And then during that time, I learned about the different agencies, National Historic Commission, then an institute, National Commission for Culture and the Arts. And I also learned about the International Committee for Monuments and Sites. So in that sense, I learned about how we connect globally. So I think this practice, I affirm this practice that I feel a sense of purpose. And I also had the chance to join field trips to related sites, such at that time was 2009. I went to Taal, Batangas, Santa Ana, Manila, Alberto House in Binyan, Laguna, and Las Casas de Filipinas de Acuzar in Batan. Everything was part of a school program or the organization. And then I was able to join national conferences about exploring economic of heritage and employment. It was important for me because that was, as a student, it was the time we are thinking about our careers. And then, so those were my early conscious exposure for Heritage Act of 2009, which made me realize that I want to do something after graduation. But I realized also the scope is might be too big for what I can do. So after graduation, I look for a similar group that's closer to home. So I got to know the people behind the Kapitbahayan sa Calle Bautista, so which I'm part of now, based in Quiapo, Manila. Uh, it was really formed to support the conservation of an old house in Quiapo, but now popularly known as Casa Boix or Casa Boa. So it is a group that focuses on community development and interpersonal relationship towards the development of our cultural heritage. So during that time, the situation calls for advocacy to increase awareness in the local community. It was also guided by the heritage law. So they applied particularly the members who led the group applied the heritage law, like declaring the heritage site. What makes it significant? So they tried to tap the different government agency to seek help. So I got involved in a few campaigns because awareness, it turns out, is still needed, and until it reached an international recognition under the World Monuments Watch in 2016. So the house got recognized. Uh, Interestingly, well, I'm from an architecture background. The group that I joined has a founding president with a background in philosophy and social work. It was Dr. Teresita Obusan. So I actually I wonder why, how related is that subject in what I do. The challenge now comes with the differences in our points of view, the architecture, the social sciences. So in 2016, I decided to learn more about Quiapo community. So I took a break from my job to focus more so in the community rather than the organization. So I like to know more about who are the people in that area. So it was with the help of the book Quiapo Heart of Manila. It was published 2006, almost 10 years ago also, and edited by Dr. Fernando Silcita, a cultural anthropologist. It was also the book I referred to for my college thesis. While the first half of the book helps me understand the heritage of Quiapo, the latter part explores the related policies and implementation challenges. So through the KKB and other supporting organization, I was able to get to know the different stakeholders in the community, such as the volunteers, the homeowners, the tenants, the entrepreneurs, and the local barangay. As I help organize a forum, learn about their concerns, I also learned that we did in the advocacy. It's a form of heritage interpretation. So as a private stakeholder, I didn't realize what I was focusing on. Like I know it's conservation, but what is the approach? So it's called heritage interpretation, which was badly needed at the time to gain to the support of the community and to understand the message. So what we found out is, well, Quiapo is known for its multicultural community with a long historical significance. The people were not updated with different sides of their story. Like it was so multicultural. Most, unfortunately, were marked with bad memories, especially concerning the lack of proper implementation of policies. Because Quiapo is in Manila, the capital city of the Philippines. And those policies were supposed to make the places better. And what do the bad memories uh, make the people? So it discouraged the people to take second chances in seeking resolutions in the subject. As in they don't really want to attend the meeting. So the community forums, it was a struggle, but were significant moves to bridge gaps in misunderstandings. So the challenge now in the alignment, we made a significant improvement in 2019, which is last year. So to align with the local government or the city hall, At least our voices reached the new mayor of Manila. So this is a step forward in updating the local government side. So we were joined by the homeowners, the other civil society. So it was good. And what they said is, "Oh, I didn't know that there was these things happening." So the other civil societies said, or the churches said. So I guess they were not affected. So in this encounter, we are reminded the emphasis for a two-way relationship for both the public and government to support each other. It's not a one-way relationship. So over the 10 years, the level of participation is, it breaks assumptions that you need to update each other. So the challenges in implementing the Heritage Act depends really on the different stakeholders, like it's layers of challenges. The trained professionals, as few as they are, given their needs, are very busy with so much work needed. We try to tap them. And also, they need to take time to do advocacy at the same time and gain support of the community so that the implementation will be more successful. And then again, the property owners are usually now descendants who struggle in sustainability financing and managing the old houses. So the issue of economics of heritage is still there, whether to prioritize economic survival over culture and heritage. And the diversity of the community adds to the issue stemming from differences in priorities and values. What may be valuable to another may be not be valuable to someone from because of the differences at that moment and period. While I have an architecture degree, this experience opened me up to understand why social science professionals are also involved in leading the advocacy. It's actually to understand yourself, your heritage, and where you're going. And then you know also what kind of economic opportunities you can seek. So that aside, the technical challenges, the biggest challenge is heritage interpretation, which we focus on how to make people engage and they themselves, like me, how I was molded as a student to seek answers and participate. So how do we make them understand the Heritage Act? How do we make them appreciate the benefits to prompt their engagement? And how do we help the communities in addressing the issue while realizing their capacity to handle as much? So, summarizing that, on a personal level, we should encourage to take a role and participate. And then it takes us to journey in a diversity of experience because you don't understand really in one go. And then it's good to start early, especially in school, because you have a fresh perspective and it does not discourage you to stay away from the issue. Then for the nonprofits or committees, improve communication coordination, dialogue, and participation among public and private stakeholders to celebrate milestones to foster mutual understanding because sometimes when the trust is broken, it's so hard to get the community together. And after all, we are in one community, whether our different approach is, is conflicting. And then when celebrating that, it is beneficial to practice other forms of heritage interpretation like songs or parties. And then for the government side, I agree with the tax incentive. It has been long voiced out by the homeowners. And financial assistance or loan programs for economic challenges. And finally, to support local champions. Because, and then after all, we are all in one community. What we do, we think and act is going to be part of who we are. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Abby. I think it's a very important point that even as we have the law, implementing the law really requires the involvement of people, the involvement of communities, and we can have the law, but if people don't see the value in it, don't see the importance of heritage to their community, then really it becomes very difficult, if not impossible, to implement the law. And rather than heritage becoming a way to bring a community together, it in fact might become a source of division and divisiveness within a community. Okay, so thank you, Abby. No, so thank you for all the speakers. At this point, we'll just we'll give way to a few questions. Okay, maybe I'll do like three or so questions. Ang daming tanong, no? I'll uh, try to figure out which of these questions are the more interesting or the exciting ones, or uh, and after that, then we'll move over to Jack to summarize the proceedings. Okay, so let's see. Uh, Here's one. Do we have a strong foundation on cultural heritage education? Can't we propose to make it part of the curriculum of all college courses? No? I think that's an important point regarding education. Who would like to answer that among the speakers?
I can.
Okay, go ahead, Kate. Yeah.
Okay, so under the heritage law, it is mandatory for the cultural properties and important cultural uh, national cultural treasures to be discussed in the basic education stage. So in elementary, the DepEd is really mandated to teach about national cultural treasures and important cultural properties. However, even if it is not mandated in the college level, there are non-government organizations that cater to this. An example of this is Tuklas Filipinas, of which I am a founding member. It was created by my batchmates in University of the Philippines Archaeological Studies program in 2015. So what we do, all of us have our respective degrees in archaeology, and all of us have had experience in archaeology. So what we do is we create we arrange archaeological information in an educational manner. Our mandate is for the interpretation and the dissemination of heritage education, focusing on archaeological information. So even if it is not really mandated under the heritage law to teach these topics in the college level, professors and other avenues are really encouraged to reach out to these type of organizations to fill in this gap. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Here's another question. I think this is quite thought provoking. Um, I think a major challenge has always been that narratives delivered in many heritage sites are tainted with nostalgia. It's easy to talk about pride when one belongs to elite classes or mostly associated with grand mansions, churches, but it still alienates millions of people who are living below the poverty line. Okay. So how do we deal with that? No, that how do we make heritage relevant to people when the focus tends to be about you know these grand places that are associated with elitism and power.
Oh, I think in our experience here, we try to make this heritage site as a venue for something more. So, like what I said earlier, like in the intangible part, traditions, crafts, and I think we leveled up on letting the community understand that we have what we call a common heritage, that it gives you identity more on the historical part uh, of the heritage zone, that people are more involved, actually, not just the homeowners, or in our local context, the sugar producing families of Silay or Negros. So we also put in the story of the cuisine, which is not really connected entirely in what they call elitist background of our heritage sites. So it's actually just putting at good content, and I don't think it's already a problem for us right now, because it's actually drawing a more interest, a glimpse of the past, and it's more on the value that you give to the present and the future. But the past is just that it's a historical element. It's more on the historical element.
Okay. Thank you very much, Solo. Um, we have a question here. Estate master plans are highly influenced by big developers who usually hire architectural firms who are more conscious of estate design and concepts of adaptive reuse and conservation. Aside from RA 10,066 and the mentioned permits and assessments for regulation, is there a way to provide incentives to developers to empower conservation of built heritage? And how can it provide convincing financial returns for these developers? I think,
Um,
yeah, Architect Joel,
am I,
yeah.
okay. I think I can cite an example.
Mhm.
We're currently working in Cebu City. The project is a Garcia Escanio Mansion. The developer wanted to have a mixed-use, multi-level, 20-story building right at the back of an old ancestral house. So what they did, nag-apply sila ng conservation plan to NHCP. We were given a no objection about it, and they incorporated the entire development to the two-story 1930s structure. And they made the old structure be the centerpiece of the entire development. Kaya naman, I think, kung gusto ng developer, kaya eh. Kaya naman nilang gawin. Yun lang, walang incentive. Wala lang financial return or assurance from the government that they will be given a relaxed tax later on. Pero kaya kung gusto. Very few projects attempted to have like something like that. Kasi nga, because of the financial return, medyo mahirap. It's very convenient for us just to demolish the building and build a new structure. And it will be more difficult for the developer to retain an old structure and then build something around it bigger and wider. So pwede naman. I think we should encourage that. And we should ask the government to do that.
Okay. So Joel, nag-freeze ng konti yung ano. But I think the point was that it's often difficult to make a decision on the financial aspects of incentives. Incentives can only help somewhat, no? Especially when you're talking about very big projects. But ultimately, it's that if the developer wants to involve heritage, wants to consider heritage, then they can find ways to make it work. Uh, and then siguro, we'll have one last. Let's see. Uh, Here's a question. I think this returns to our early discussion about heritage value. I think we should rethink the matter of heritage value and the seeming need to market it. Some of our cultural properties are not technically valued by locals themselves for monetary or tourism purposes, such as sacred sites, IP traditions, etc. So cultural education should also be emphasized as a means to build capacities and consider cultural sensitivities and civic responsibility. So I guess yun, that there are really certain intangibles that you cannot quantify. So Ivan, yeah, what are your thoughts on this? Yeah.
Well, again, no, if we want to really change this paradigm of value, we need to include no heritage value into the picture. I think that we have to sit down and discuss, for example, how to make it expensive to demolish something that is very valuable. No, right now, developers really don't care about heritage because it really doesn't make a dent on their budget. So I mean, in other countries, they make it really expensive to demolish things, or even impossible, no, to demolish things that are of heritage value, especially if these are properties that are protected or have a landmark status, no. So when it's now time really to put this kind of value into the economic equation. Um, Although of course we would have wanted, people to preserve, or developers, or business owners to preserve heritage, because of course of that intrinsic value, no. But if they cannot understand, or if they fail to understand that heritage value, we can find ways, no, to make it expensive or dent their budgets again, no, to be able to realize that there is value in heritage, and there is something that you can gain out of it as well, no. It's just like a little bit of a jolt to our developers. That's how I see it, but of course there are many other ways that we can increase that value.
Okay. So at this point, I'd like to thank all the speakers. No, but first, I'd like to bring Jack on board. Jack Garcia. He's a faculty member at the La Salle College of St. Benil, the tourism department. Jack, can you? Uh, Jack will give a quick summary of the points raised by our speakers. No? This, of course, is not simply an intellectual exercise. No, we really do hope that the inputs generated by this group will be something that we can forward to policymakers and the cultural agencies, not to provide some guidance on how they can move forward with Heritage Act. Okay, so turn it over to Jack.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We're actually fortunate to actually hear different perspectives from people both in the public and the private sector, especially in terms of heritage. As you very well know, heritage has become first of mind to many people, and we see so much discussion, so much interest about heritage these days. As Ms. Kay earlier said, and just to reiterate, heritage will always be a continuing conversation. The how and the who will always have to be something that will evolve through the years. And we see, of course, that there is a lot of work that needs to be done, but we see very well that there is a big role that is played by uh, one big stakeholder, which in this case is the national government, who we see as best partnering with the local government. It has been said the national government is supposed to provide the means by which people can be excited about heritage. And I think, yes, there has been moves towards that, but then of course, there's always so much more that can be done. I would like to also echo the views expressed by Mr. Solomon Locsin, who has actually shared with us his success in terms of seeing to it that heritage is an integral part of Silay City. We actually realized that the role of the local government unit is not to be underestimated. It can also be said that maybe in the absence of laws as espoused by the national government, it will be now incumbent upon local government units to actually take the lead and the initiative to make sure that heritage is actually promoted on that level. Um, And lastly, I think we also could not possibly underestimate the big role that education plays in terms of promoting heritage. And we see that it's a continuing effort. Um, we see the value of it actually being instilled early on in our educational system. We also see the value of it actually also being imparted to the members of a local community. So we look forward to a better interpretation of the law, a better implementation of it as well, and more uh, concerted and focused participation from all the stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jack. And of course, thank you again to our speakers, Kate, Ivan, Solo, Kay, Abby, and Joel. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you very much for all your insights. And of course, I'd like to thank again the people who've supported this event from HCS. And then, of course, the team from Xlink and the Tourism Congress. Thank you for allowing us to be part of your Facebook pages and sharing this event with you. Um, and of course, everyone else who came and joined us in this event, thank you very much. And then, so with that, everyone have a happy National Heritage Month. And I hope you stay tuned for the further events that we have on this organization and of course in other organizations and other institutions that are involved in National Heritage Month. Again, on May 23, we will be hosting another forum with, this time we bring on board our colleagues from across Southeast Asia to discuss heritage in the age of the pandemic. Um, and so do stay tuned for that. And with that, everyone, thank you, everyone, and good
Thank
afternoon.
you.
Cases, good
Thank you
morning.
very much. See you.
Thank you. Take care. Take care.